I was hoping I'd have to strap you.
In an interesting position with the red TJ now. Look under the rear end. See the rear diff is stuck in a notch between a couple of rocks. So what we're gonna have to do is lift up back into the Jeep, tire under this rock, so we can either drive it forward or backward out. First time out with the high lift jack.
Ta-da!
I hope he doesn't break my window. Just successfully used the high lift jack to lift up the back of this Wrangler. I got a rock under there. He's going to back off and we're going to readjust, get a better angle on it.
So that's that. That was the first wheeling trip I've ever made with the red Jeep, the big red Jeep, or whatever you'd prefer to call it, since I've had it in this state. Like I said in the first video, as it turns out, the Jeep is seemingly completely point and shoot. Obviously, I haven't put it through a whole lot of things, just this one trail, but one thing to take away from the experience so far is that, which I expected, is that the Jeep is much more capable than I am as a driver. Before, when I had it on the 31s, I was probably about equally as capable as the Jeep was, if not more capable as a driver than the Jeep was. Now the table is turned the other way, and I need to spend a lot more time, wheeling it, which is its, strong suit as a vehicle, and get a feel for, what it can do and what it can't do and whatnot, and really find its limits. Obviously the build is still going on. I'll leave a annotation right here to a link to the playlist for the Jeep. The build is still continuing. There are still things to do and things to come for the Jeep. Right now I'll end up being in a low between big projects and whatever next big project comes for the Jeep. But there are still big things that will end up coming in the future for this Jeep. As it sits right now, this happens to be the first video you've ever watched of this Jeep, it is running Wagoneer Dana 44s front and rear with 488-to-1 gears in both front and rear axles. Currently it has lunchbox lockers front and rear. It has, all the way around, it is running 5.5-inch springs front and rear. The rear, of course, are leaf springs, and the front, of course, are coil springs. It actually sits somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 6 to 7 now. It's probably settled a little bit since I measured it last, so probably in the 6 to 7-ish range, closer to the 7, I imagine. The rear also has Iron Rock Off-Road boomerang shackles, because the Rubicon Express springs that it's running in the back are longer, necessitating the use of a boomerang style shackle so I didn't collide with the back of the rear spring hanger area. It is a long arm setup. It's just your normal radius arm setup that most long arm kits are for Jeeps. It is made by Serious Off-Road Products, which is a company out of Colorado, I believe. The steering setup is also a Serious Off-Road product. The shocks are just Bilstein 5100s. The tires are 35 by 12.5 R15 Goodyear Wrangler MTRs. Both front and rear bumpers are made by Rs Fabrication, which is a shop out of Ohio. I think it's a Midwest state. Forgive me if I got that wrong, but it's a Midwest state. The tire carrier is made by Dirtbound Off-Road. If you follow along my series, you know how I feel about that company. But that happened to be who makes that tire carrier. It's got a Tom Woods rear drive shaft. The front drive shaft is a stock XJ front drive shaft out of an automatic XJ, just lengthened a little bit to account for the extra height and whatnot. The stock transfer case and the stock transmission, stock engine, of course. The transfer case is just running in Iron Rock Off-Road Hack and Tap. The front axle, the front Wagoneer 44 has been converted to lockout hubs, of course. It's got stock axle shafts, stock U-joints, well, new stock U-joints. It has a TNT truss on top of it, which is how I converted it from a spring under leaf spring setup to be a front control arm setup. It does have an onboard air setup. I think that's it for modifications. In terms of damage that was incurred on this trip, there was none actual damage or any breakage on either Jeep that you saw in this video. The only takeaways from this trip, mechanically wise, is that the onboard air system puts out a lot of heat when you actually, after a day of wheeling and actually go to use it. So much so that the high pressure side of the compressor actually melted the rubber line and was able to, blast it off. So for now, to see if it works, I have remedied that issue by replacing the line and using 2 hose clamps as opposed to 1, hoping that it can grip it a little bit better and not slip off because of the heat. If not, I have considered the idea of getting a length of copper tubing and bending it to be whatever shape you would call that, to get from the air compressor to the distribution block of the air setup. Obviously, I'd have to still have a small section of rubber hose in there to allow for movement and shock absorption. But if I get a long enough piece of copper tubing, I could then coil it and allow for some heat dissipation as well. But other than that, there were no mechanical issues at all. Everything worked as planned and as flawlessly as it could be. So, like I said, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, give the video a like. Of course, check us out on Facebook. Link will be in the description. And if you like this Jeep or anything else you saw, check out our other videos. There's a playlist, 2 playlists for the big red Jeep in this video. One of them will be just the axle swap, and the next will be sort of the continued phase of the build, which will be where all the rest of the videos go. So, with that, that's that.